Hello and welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. Today on the show, we are completing our 3-part series of how to find good people. And on today's episode, I'm actually featured as an interviewee. Bruce wanted to talk about leadership and the types of skills and ideals that center around leadership, and how leadership isn't necessarily a inherent thing within people. So leadership can be learned. And there's certain ideals and understandings that can help you become a stronger leader. And these are the types of things that help bring in new employees. I offer my perspective as somebody younger within the workforce. What's been my perspective on the leaders that I've worked for? What's led me away from them and what's led me to them? If you have any questions about today's episode or want to have any discussions around any of the topics discussed, be sure to jump on over to the Joinery Facebook Hub over on Facebook. Did you know that we turn almost all of our podcasts into video podcasts? If you're curious to see the video version of this podcast as well as many others, go over to the Joinery Coach on YouTube to check it out. Now, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. My name is Bruce, and we are continuing our 3 steps through how to find great people ongoing, conversation. And today we're on the 3rd and last part of this series, I guess you could call it, of how to find great people in your business. And I've invited a very special guest to the podcast, Reilly Poling. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. If those of you don't know Reilly actually produces the podcast and does all our media production, all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah.
But I just thought it would be better to have a couple of people in on this conversation because, like most people, you've had a few jobs, you've worked for a few people, and the 3rd topic of this conversation is around, are you a good leader? So the people that you work for, you obviously decided to choose them over any other position you were going to. The topic of this podcast is how to find good people, or how to get them to find you. And in many ways, it's about how do those people stay with you, or how do they become raving fans of the business and actually want the business to succeed. So the 3rd point that I'm making here really is the business leader needs to be that sort of person that inspires people and is a great leader. So Reilly, as you look back over the positions you've had, without, we won't name any names and call anybody out here, but you can think about the positions that you've been in where you've gone and worked for someone and you've kind of put a lot of your trust in, this being a future for you of some kind. Talk a little bit about how that either worked or that didn't work for you.
It's definitely that kind of level of trust. I mean, the people I've worked for, there's definitely that level of charisma that attracts you to start. I've liked a lot of the jobs I've had, and it usually comes down to I've enjoyed working for the person I've been working for.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of level of trust, but maintaining that level of trust, I think, has sometimes been what falters. As nice and charismatic as maybe that person is, maybe I'm seeing some red flags here and here. Maybe this has been cut short. Maybe 2 jobs have turned into one where they didn't need to, so that the owner could cut costs, things like that, which starts to take away my level of trust in the owner, I think.
It's almost like you're feeling like in some ways you're being taken advantage of because what you started out being the thing that you're going to do is then grown into something more and more and more. So that's part of leadership when it kind of wanes a little bit is great leaders really know where their team is at and listens to them.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Great leaders, even the word great is probably a little bit too powerful because everybody thinks of, I'm going to be a great leader like Martin Luther King or Barack Obama or any of these amazing leaders. And we're never going to inspire to be at that level.
No.
But we can certainly take away things or elements of what those people bring to the table. Now, obviously, you've chosen a different path. So some of the positions that you were on, you didn't continue with them.
Yeah.
What would it have taken for somebody who was your boss or your leader? What would it have taken for them to have done differently, for you to have said, I'm going to stick with this forever because this person is someone that I really want to be connected to? And what would they have to have done differently?
It's a really good question. I think it for me, it's the consistent communication. A lot of the time, I guess I've dropped off because I felt like the owner couldn't tell where I was at or didn't really care. I won't say where I work, but before I worked at the Joinery Coach, I worked as a subcontractor for live media production. So I would rock up and help set up microphones, or if they needed staging or lighting set up, I would help with that kind of stuff. And it's a very full-on industry where there's no set hours, and essentially you could work 21 hours or 24 hours, and that's just kind of how it goes. But what that, I guess, came down to was the owner or the person managing me understanding maybe that asking somebody to work 21 hours is unreasonable, and especially at the pay level. And it's that kind of disconnect of there isn't an acknowledgement of this is a ridiculous amount of hours for the amount of money you're earning. And so that creates, I think, a disconnect between me and the owner, where I feel like I'm just a pawn they're sending out. And if I say yes, then it doesn't matter my reasoning as long as I say yes. They're not going to, question any of that. So
what would they have to do differently? They would have to acknowledge, because probably being paid more wouldn't have made any difference, right? No matter what, 21 hours or excessive hours at any rate is not going to work. You're going to basically break as a person anyway. So the money's no good if you're broken.
Exactly.
So it really, it does come down to the acknowledgement of you as a person and what you're experiencing, right?
I think, acknowledging that kind of stuff, or coming up with systems so that to ensure that one person's working that many hours, you're not asking too much of somebody. Finding a way to be across the whole team in a way so that everyone knows who everyone is and where everyone's at, so that then you can kind of work together on a team and those kind of things, where if, he's asked me to work 21 hours or whatever, I can say, well, I know that this person is free on this time or something. We can negotiate around it. So communication in that aspect is really important.
It sounds like, like in the industry you're in, much like the joinery industry, a lot of the people that have taken on business ownership haven't transitioned into really learning how to build a team and how to get that team connected and working well. They stay stuck in, what are we doing here as a business? Like, what are the actual things we're doing? And stay in that mode. It's almost like they stay in employee mode and expect everybody else to be in employee mode with them, even though they're the business owner. And because they're the business owner, they'll do all these extra things without any blinking of an eye, because they own the business and they know that the business is going to get a benefit from it. And because they stay in employee mode, they expect all the other employees that are working with them at that level to do the same thing. I remember when I left where I was working, essentially that company was losing a lot of their top employees, and it was because I think we all reached the same level of feeling like pawns, that we're all being kind of taken advantage of. And it's the same kind of thing. You can churn through employees until you start losing your key members, and then what are you going to do? Like, you can bring in new people and try to train them, but if people are smart enough to pick up a cycle, I think, of like, hold on, this person's only been here for 3 months, this person's only been here for a month, their last employee left, so you pick up these red flags, you know what I mean? And you're right, and it's different if you join a team. Well, that person's been here for 15 years, and this person's been here for 20 years. It's a good sign. Generally, it's a good sign. Should be a good sign anyway.
Exactly.
So, what I find really interesting about this conversation is people that are listening to this podcast are in the joinery and cabinet production industry, and we all sort of feel like we're unique, like these sort of things only apply to us in this industry. But you were working in a completely different industry, totally different to our industry, but exactly the same problems you encountered. So humans are humans, right? No matter what happens, if, everybody needs somebody that they're going to be inspired by. Everybody needs someone that, I shouldn't say everybody. There are people that are very self-directed and self-motivated, but even those people need somebody that they can kind of be accountable to, or help them become accountable to themselves. We're a coaching business, and we like to place ourselves in that role in many cases, where a lot of our clients, business owners, are lacking that accountability to achieve things because they don't have that person that they're sort of, trying to bounce ideas off of. So I think one of the things that we do pretty well as a coaching business is we provide that, that accountability conversation. And employees need the same thing. You need to be held accountable to achieve the things that you need to do to feel good about your work. So to find great people, the core of the business needs a leader, and not just one leader. Like if you have a larger business where you've got managers and people working under managers, those managers need to also be great leaders that inspire their team to do great work as well. So finding great people isn't, I guess the moral of this conversation and this topic is not so much about finding those great people. It's more about when you do have people coming into your business, setting up the conditions for those people to thrive and be successful by having great leadership.
Yeah. Something I learned when I joined doing live sound equipment, subcontracting, I didn't really know what I was doing. I don't think I would consider myself in that role a good person. And what I quickly learned is that no one in that industry is really that.
Yeah.
But what you figure out is that anyone can be that. You show somebody how to do something and they'll do it. Maybe some people learn quicker than others or have different ways of learning things, but everyone has the capability to become a good person. And it's about fostering that relationship as well as their skills.
Yeah.
Because that emotional connection to somebody, I think, is very vital when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
Because sure, you can teach somebody how to do something, but if they feel like they're being taken advantage of, or you're just another employee, you're not really going to want to stay, is kind of what I found.
And you're not taking on board the things that person is saying anyway. You're probably lacking the respect for that person.
Yeah.
And therefore you start thinking of doing things your way instead of their way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's that understanding, and I think, explaining why you do things a certain way, because it might be that you've done something for 30 years. Somebody new will come in and go, well, why don't you do it like this? And then you go, oh, this guy doesn't know anything. Yeah. But it's having that lack of disdain and going, oh, we do it like this because of this reason, or like fostering a positive relationship is very important.
Yeah, and great leaders do that. So I think to wrap up this little topic that we're hitting on here right now is to find great people. You may have great people already, and the lack of leadership or the lack of great inspirational feelings in the business is making what might otherwise be good people now kind of going in another direction. So great leadership, if you're a business owner, what I would say is ask yourself a really pointed question. Are you actually someone that your team of people would follow?
I think you can learn how to, understanding people. Some people get it right away. Some people have an inherent skill of understanding and seeing people, but it's also something you can learn. And I think taking the time to learn about people and their needs is very important if you're going into a leadership role.
It's a really important topic. The general thought is that great leaders are born.
Yeah.
It's not true.
Yeah.
When you look at all the great leaders in the world, you see them when they were great leaders. You didn't see them 20 or 30 years prior to that when they were terrible. You didn't see that. You only see them when they were, these amazing people that learned all this stuff to be great leaders. And the great thing about leaders, and you make a really good point, Reilly, where some people will say, well, I'm just not a born leader. I'm just not a good leader.
Yeah.
And they're selling themselves short. Because we teach people how to really understand their emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And emotional intelligence is a really important thing because it's manipulatable. You can actually improve your emotional intelligence. And all great leaders have one thing in common. They're all high in emotional intelligence. But they didn't just have that. They taught themselves that. And not all great leaders have high IQs, but all great leaders have great emotional intelligence. And that's empathy towards others around you and empathy towards yourself. So if you're actually able to react well in the moment, you're doing it not only for yourself, but you're doing it for the other person in the heated moment as well. And I think if we're being really honest, if we think about through our lives all the great people that we've been around that have inspired us in some way, that said, I want to be like that person, it's most likely that person has a high emotional intelligence rating.
Yeah.
Unless you're a tyrant, you're one of those people that wants to take over the world, and I get there's those people out there.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about humans in general, most people would identify the person they want to be most like as the person who responded really well in the heat of a moment. And if anybody listening to this right now is saying, well, I'm just not that person, give yourself a break, because you can be that person or at least more like that person.
Yeah. There's easy skills to learn that you can foster within yourself, I think, that breed that kind of thing. It's not it's not as complicated as your mind makes it out to be.
Yeah.
You just need to take the steps to learn it, I think.
Yeah. And you're certainly not born that way, right? Because I would say, we're a good example, right? I have a pretty quick trigger, right, in heated moments. Now you're my son and you don't. Right? So it's not, this is a good example of how you're not born to be like your parents. You have a very different reaction to the heat of the moment situation, whereas, I react very differently to you. So my commitment to learning emotional intelligence is more important because, I have a longer distance to travel to get on top of that sort of thing. But just being self-aware of it is probably the first step.
Yeah. Being aware of your flaws is definitely,
Yeah.
Because you can work on all that kind of stuff. And
yeah,
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. I like it. Thanks for joining us and adding your flavor to this.
You're welcome.
So to wrap it up, the third point here is, make sure that if you're the leader of the business and you're actually the business owner, make sure that you are the leader that's going to lead things through the fire and have everybody willing to be there with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for listening. Again, if you've got any questions or comments, or you just want to jam with us, put a comment. If you're watching this on something where there's a comment, just add it to the box, or join us in our Joinery Business Hub, our Facebook group, and we can have a chat there. Bruce from the Joinery Business Podcast. Peace out.